There is a quality of presence that is felt before it is understood, in a room of swirling anxieties. They are a point of stillness. In a conversation laced with urgency, their words land with the weight of a stone, not the scatter of pebbles. This is not an absence of feeling, it is not a void, it is something far more potent, a profound intimacy with the currents of their own inner world. To observe them is to witness a different relationship with time itself. They are not bracing for the next wave, nor are they caught in the undertow of the last. They are simply here, in this breath. And the next, this calm is not a trait they were born with. It is a landscape they have learned painstakingly to inhabit. To mistake this calm for emptiness is to mistake the deep ocean for a shallow puddle. The stillness is not the absence of the storm, it is the presence of something deeper, something that the storm cannot touch. Observe them in the midst of the crisis. The air is thick with the sharp scent of panic, percussive rhythm of raised voices, and the frantic tap-tap-tapping of keyboards trying to outrun a problem. Bodies are animated, shoulders tense up towards ears, faces are etched with the strain of a looming deadline or a critical error. And then there is this one person. The shoulders are not slumped in resignation, but rest in a natural, easy line. The hands are still, perhaps steepled in thought, or resting palms down on the surface of a desk as if grounding the entire chaotic room. There is no fidgeting, no compulsive reaching for a phone, no need to fill the silence with nervous noise. They are a quiet eddy in a rushing river. This composure can be misinterpreted. It can be read as aloofness, a lack of care, as if they are not fully grasping the gravity of the situation. But look closer at the eyes. They are not vacant, they are profoundly focused. They are taking in the entire scene. The flustered manager, the anxious intern, the spreadsheet glowing with red numbers. Without being captured by any single part of it, their gaze is wide, peripheral, absorbing the landscape of the problem rather than being snagged by its sharpest hooks. They are listening not just to the words being spoken, but to the fear underpinning them. This is not detachment, it is a deeper, more complete form of engagement. Internally, the landscape is just as complex as it is for anyone else. The initial spark of adrenaline still flashes, the knot of worry still attempts to form in the stomach. The mind still offers up its catalog of catastrophic outcomes. The difference lies in what happens next. For many, that spark becomes a wildfire, the knot becomes a chokehold. The catastrophic thought a definitive prophecy, but for this person, the process is more like watching weather patterns move across a vast, open sky. They see the dark cloud of anxiety forming, they note the cold front of fear, they feel the internal pressure change. But they are the sky, not the storm. They have developed a faculty, a quiet observer within that does not get swept away by the meteorological drama of their own nervous system. Their speech, when it comes, reflects this inner architecture. It is often slightly slower, each word chosen with a deliberateness that feels, in a frantic moment, almost luxurious. There are pauses not of hesitation but of digestion. They are allowing the information to settle, to find its own level before crafting a response. This creates a peculiar, almost gravitational pull in the conversation. The raised voices around them gradually lower to meet the frequency of this calm. The frantic energy begins to orbit this point of stillness. They do not command silence, they embody it, and the silence naturally expands to include others. This is the first, most visible layer of their psychology, a cultivated relationship with reactivity. The world presents a stimulus, a piece of bad news, a conflict, a sudden change. The primal brain, the amygdala, sounds its alarm, but in the space between that alarm and the response, they have found a territory. It is in this territory that their calm resides. It is not that they do not feel the impulse to react, to panic, to snap back. They simply do not grant that impulse immediate sovereignty. They meet it, acknowledge its presence, and then from that place of slight distance choose. The stillness then is not a pre-existing condition. It is a moment-by-moment negotiation. It is the active, repeated choice to not be drowned by the wave, but to study its shape, to feel its power, and to decide how to move with it. It is a quiet rebellion against the tyranny of the urgent, in a culture that glorifies the busy, the stressed, the perpetually overwhelmed. Their calm is a radical act. It suggests that there is another way to be, that one can care deeply without being consumed, that one can be effective without being frantic, that the center can hold not by chance but by a subtle, unwavering discipline of the inner world. They are living proof that the storm is only one reality, and that beneath its churning surface there is always a deeper, quieter sea. The foundation of this calm is often laid early, in the quiet or chaotic soils of childhood. It begins not as a conscious choice, but as a necessary adaptation, a way of building a shelter within the self. For some, it was a temperament gifted by biology, a nervous system that arrived with a lower set point for alarm, a slower burning fuse. These were the infants who could sleep through a thunderclap, the toddlers who observed the world from the safety of a parent's lap with a deep, thoughtful gaze, unperturbed by the noise and flash of it all. Their calm was an innate language, their first and most natural way of being. For others, the architecture was forged in response to its opposite, in a household where emotions were volatile and unpredictable, where the emotional weather could shift from sun to hurricane in a single slammed door. This calm became a survival strategy. It was the creation of an inner room, a psychic space where one could retreat when the outer world became too loud, too sharp, too much. In the absence of external stability, they became their own anchor. They learned to watch the storm from a window, understanding intuitively that to step out into it was to be swept away. This was not a withdrawal from feeling, but a profound, precocious understanding of how to navigate it without drowning. The role of the early caregivers is etched into this foundation. A child who falls and scrapes a knee looks first to a parent's face to understand what has happened. Is this a catastrophe, or is this a momentary hurt that will pass? The caregiver who responds with a steady presence, who acknowledges the pain without being consumed by it, who offers a soothing touch and a calm voice, is providing the blueprint. They are teaching, through their own regulated nervous system, that the world, even in its painful moments, is fundamentally manageable. The child internalizes this response, building their own inner caregiver, a voice that later in life will whisper, "This is difficult, but you can handle it. This feeling is temporary. You are safe." Conversely, a caregiver who meets every stumble with their own amplified anxiety, who gasps and frets and radiates panic, teaches a different lesson. The world becomes a place of constant, looming threat. The child's internal blueprint is one of alarm, their foundation cracked with fault lines of apprehension. For the one who becomes calm, this dynamic often forced a role reversal. They became the small, steady rock for their own parents, learning to manage the emotional turbulence of the adults around them. In this inversion, they discovered a potent truth. Their own stillness could be a source of stability, not just for themselves, but for others. This early, weighty responsibility, while often a burden, also became a rigorous training ground. There's also the child who found their composure not in the social, but in the solitary, in the quiet corners of a backyard, watching the patient industry of ants, in the pages of a book where problems had beginnings, middles, and ends, in the rhythmic, repetitive motion of a hobby where focus narrowed the world to a single, manageable point. These activities were not escapes but practices. They were the gymnasiums where the muscle of attention was strengthened. They were spaces where time slowed down, where the frantic pace of the human world gave way to the more patient rhythms of nature, story, or craft. In these solitary engagements, they were building a relationship with a self that existed independently of the social fray, a core identity that remained unshaken by external approval or chaos. This early architecture, whether laid down by gentle biology or constructed in response to chaos, creates what feels like a hidden reservoir. It is a deep, internal well of quiet to which they have lifelong access. The temperamentally calm child continues to draw from it naturally, a birthright they scarcely think about. The one who built it out of necessity knows its location with a kind of somatic memory. They can find their way back to it in The dark, it is the product of a million micro-moments, 1,000 small responses and observations that gradually hardened into a structure, a personal sanctuary. It is not a wall that keeps the world out, but a foundation that allows them to stand firmly within it, no matter how the ground shakes. Beneath the observable behavior, beneath the conscious choices and the early foundations lies the living substrate of calm, the human nervous system. This is not a metaphor, it is a biological reality, a complex network of electrical impulses and chemical soups that can be measured, mapped, and understood. The calm that appears as a psychological state is, in fact, a physiological achievement. It is the result of a system that has learned the art of the conversation between alert and rest, between action and integration. At the heart of this system is a nerve known as the vagus. It is the longest cranial nerve, a meandering, intricate superhighway connecting the brain to the heart, the lungs, the gut. It is the central switchboard of the body's rest and digest response, the counterbalance to the adrenaline-fueled symphony of fight or flight, a well-toned vagus nerve acts like a sophisticated regulator. When a stressor appears, it allows the heart rate to rise appropriately to meet the demand, but then with a swift and efficient grace, it applies the brakes. It coaxes the heart back to a steady rhythm. It signals the lungs to breathe deeply once more. It tells the body the emergency has passed. This is not a suppression of the stress response, but a masterful conduction of it. This capacity can be seen in something called heart rate variability. It is not the pulse itself, but the subtle millisecond variations in the time between each heartbeat. A low, rigid variability indicates a system stuck on high alert, a drummer beating a monotonous, frantic rhythm. A high fluid variability, however, is the sign of a system that is resilient, adaptable, and responsive. It is a jazz musician able to improvise, to syncopate, to flow with the music of the moment. The calm individual often possesses this physiological signature, a heart that can dance with stress and then return effortlessly to its baseline waltz. Their body is quite literally in a constant, graceful dialogue with its environment. This dialogue is a learned language. The body keeps a hidden ledger of every panic, every sustained period of tension, every moment of true safety. For someone who has lived with chronic anxiety, the ledger is filled with entries of alarm, teaching the system that the world is a perpetually dangerous place. The body, in its innocent wisdom, believes this story and prepares accordingly, its muscles pre-tensed, its senses hyper vigilant. But for the one who is calm, the ledger tells a different story. It is a record of repeated returns to baseline. It is a history of facing a challenge and then, consciously or not, allowing the body to complete the cycle, to discharge the unused adrenaline, to signal the all clear. This repetition writes a new, more trusting story into the very tissues of the body. Breath is the most direct access point to this anchored system. It is the only autonomic function that can be both voluntary and involuntary, a bridge between the conscious mind and the subconscious body. The calm person, whether through formal practice or intuitive understanding, has become a master of this bridge. Their default state of breathing is often naturally slower, deeper, originating from the diaphragm. This alone keeps the vagus nerve engaged, a constant, low-grade signal of safety to the brain. In a moment of stress, their attention turns there first, not as a dramatic gesture, but as a subtle internal recalibration, a long, slow exhale. It is a physiological command, a direct line to the brainstem whispering, "You can stand down now." This is the silent, biological work that underwrites the visible poise. It is a body that has been taught through countless repetitions that it can trust its own capacity to return to center. The calm mind is not leading a placid body. It is the natural, emergent expression of a body that feels, on a cellular level, fundamentally secure. The thoughts are clear because the system is not flooding them with panic chemicals. The emotions are manageable because the physiology is not amplifying them into overwhelming tsunamis. Their peace is not just a state of mind. It is a state of the body, a deep, organic rhythm that hums beneath the surface of everything they are. Calm is not a fortress without walls. It is a cherished garden, and like any garden, it requires tending, protection, and discernment about what is allowed to take root. The calm mind is not a passive receiver of the world's chaos. It is a curator of its own inner environment. This requires a particular kind of vigilance, a quiet, unwavering commitment to guarding the gates of attention and energy. It is a practice of saying no, of turning away, of consciously selecting the stimuli that will be granted entry into the sacred space of the inner world. The most obvious gatekeeper is the one that stands between the self and the digital torrent, the endless scroll of news, the curated highlight reels of social media, the pings and notifications that fracture attention into 1,000 scattered pieces. These are recognized not merely as distractions but as pollutants. There is an intuitive understanding that the mind metabolizes what it consumes, a diet of outrage. Comparison and fragmented information creates a mind that is itself outraged. Comparative and fragmented, so boundaries are erected, not with resentment but with the same practicality one might use to lock a door at night. The phone is not the first thing reached for upon waking. Notifications are silenced. The consumption of news is deliberate, timed, and limited, a conscious intake of information, not an immersion in a state of perpetual alarm. This guardianship extends to the physical and social realms. There is a keen awareness of the people who are energy givers and those who are energy takers. This is not a cold calculation of social utility, but a somatic recognition. Certain conversations leave one feeling light and clear, others leave a residue of heaviness, a sense of being emotionally depleted. The calm individual learns to navigate these interactions with a gentle economy. They do not necessarily cut people out, but they may limit the duration of exposure, or they learn to don a subtle psychic cloak, a way of being present and compassionate without absorbing the other person's emotional weather. They understand that empathy does not require drowning alongside someone. One can throw a lifeline from the safety of the shore. Perhaps the most sophisticated gatekeeping, however, happens at the threshold of the mind itself. This is the management of the inner narrative. For many, the mind is a room where the radio of anxious thoughts is always on, tuned to a station that broadcasts a continuous loop of worry, self-criticism, and catastrophic forecasting. The calm person has learned through long practice to notice the radio. They do not necessarily shut it off. That is often an impossible task. Instead, they practice turning down the volume. They notice the thought, "This is a disaster," and without fighting it, they gently add, "And it is a thought I am having." This slight distance, this meta-awareness, is the most powerful gatekeeper of all. It prevents the thought from moving in, unpacking its bags, and taking over the entire house of the mind. This is not a life of sterile isolation, a bubble-wrapped existence free from all difficulty. It is a life of profound selectivity. It is the understanding that attention is the most precious resource one has, and that it must be spent with the same care as one's life savings. They guard their mornings, their evenings, their moments of transition. They create rituals, a cup of tea in silence, a walk without a destination, a few minutes of looking out a window, that serve as airlocks between the outer world of demands and the inner world of self. These are not indulgent luxuries, they are non-negotiable maintenance, the daily cleaning of the lens through which they perceive everything. The result is a mind that feels like a clean, well-lit room. There is space. The furniture of thought is arranged with intention. There is no clutter of unnecessary worry, no piles of unresolved resentment gathering dust in the corners. This uncluttered space is what allows for the clarity, the patience, the deep listening that characterizes their presence. It is not that they do not have problems or feel pain. It is that their inner world is not also a problem. They have made it a sanctuary, and they protect it with the quiet, unwavering dedication of a guardian protecting the source of their own peace. At the core of this enduring calm lies a paradox that the rational mind struggles to grasp. The surest path to peace is not through control, but through a radical and intelligent surrender. This is the final, fundamental layer, the alchemy of acceptance. It is the understanding that a great portion of human suffering comes not from the pain itself, but from the frantic, exhausting resistance to what already is. The calm individual has, in some deep and unshakable way, made peace with the inherent uncertainty of life. They have stopped trying to command the ocean and have instead learned the art of floating. This begins with a different relationship with reality, for many, a difficult event. Missed flight, a professional rejection, a personal conflict, is immediately met with a storm of internal protest. This shouldn't be happening. This isn't fair. If only I had this. Resistance is a form of arguing with reality, and as the saying goes, arguing with reality is like trying to teach a cat to bark, futile and exhausting. The calm mind has a different first response. It is a quiet, almost somatic recognition. This is what is happening. It is not approval. It is not passivity. It is the simple, profound act of lowering the weapon of resistance. It is the precondition for any clear-eyed, effective response. One cannot solve a problem they are busy denying exists. This acceptance extends most powerfully to the inner world of emotion. They have come to understand that emotions are not commands, but whether a feeling of anger does not mean one must shout or break things. A surge of fear does not mean one must flee. A wave of sadness does not mean one is broken. They have learned to sit with these energies, to allow them to flow through the body without becoming them. They can feel the clench of anxiety in their chest and simply breathe into the tightness, offering it space instead of condemnation. They do not see difficult emotions as enemies to be defeated, but as messengers carrying information, often outdated or exaggerated, but information nonetheless. By listening to the messenger, they disarm it. This is where their calm reveals its true depth. It is not a state devoid of dark or difficult feelings. It is a state that has made room for them. It is a vast sky that can hold a thundercloud without becoming one. There is a profound self-compassion in this approach. The inner critic, the voice that whispers of inadequacy or failure, is not given a megaphone. It is heard with the same gentle curiosity as any other thought. Ah, there is the story that I am not enough. How interesting that it has arrived again. This diffusion from their own internal narrative creates an immense freedom. They are no longer puppet jerked about by every passing thought or feeling. They are the awareness behind it all, the silent, spacious witness. This alchemy transforms the very nature of a problem. What was once a threat to their equilibrium becomes simply the next piece of data, the next set of conditions to be worked with. A setback at work is no longer a verdict on their self-worth. It is a logistical puzzle. A difficult conversation is not an arena for judgment, but a shared problem to be navigated. This shift from a personal, emotional frame to an impersonal, operational one is liberating. It conserves an enormous amount of energy otherwise wasted on recrimination and fear. The energy that was spent fighting the reality of the situation is now available to engage with it creatively. Ultimately, this is a stance of profound trust. It is a trust that they have the internal resources to handle whatever arises. It is a trust that even in the midst of pain and confusion, their core self remains intact. It is a trust that life, in its messy, unpredictable flow, is not inherently hostile. This trust is not blind faith. It is earned through thousands small instances of having met difficulty and discovered, on the other side, that they were not destroyed. They have learned to float in the ocean of experience, knowing they cannot control the waves, but trusting utterly in their own ability to stay afloat, to breathe and to wait for the storm to pass. Their calm is the evidence of this hard one. Trust, a quiet radiance that emanates from a place of unshakable, inner yes to what is. The final layer is not a layer at all, but the very air and water that sustain the entire structure. It is the practice of presence, the gentle, moment-by-moment return to the only reality that truly exists, this one. The calm that seems so innate, so woven into the fabric of their being, is not a static achievement. It is a living thing, and like all living things, it requires sustenance. This sustenance is found in the conscious, deliberate anchoring of attention in the immediate sensorium, in the relentless present tense of the body and the world around it. This practice is often invisible, a subtle internal shift happening beneath the surface of ordinary activity. It is the conscious feeling of the feet on the floor while waiting in a queue, the solid connection to the ground, a quiet rebuttal to the rising impatience. It is the deliberate noticing of the weight of a coffee cup in the hand, the warmth radiating into the skin, the complex aroma meeting the nostrils. For a few seconds, the world of thought of past regrets and future anxieties recedes, and there is only the cup, the heat, the smell. This is not a grand meditation on a mountaintop. It is a micro meditation in the middle of a Tuesday. These tiny, frequent returns are what keep the system grounded, preventing it from being hijacked by the abstract, often frightening world of thought. The breath is their most constant and loyal companion in this endeavor. They have developed an unconscious intimacy with its rhythm. It is a barometer they check without even thinking. The moment the breath becomes shallow, caught high in the chest, it signals a departure from the present. The mind has latched onto a story, a worry, a plan. The noticing of the breath is the homing signal back. A single, conscious, deeper breath is the recalibration. It is the reset button pressed a dozen, 100 times a day. This is not a dramatic breathing exercise, but a quiet, intimate conversation with their own aliveness, a gentle tug on the leash, reminding the mind where home is. Their engagement with tasks, even mundane ones, reflects this quality of attention. They are not simply rushing through a chore to get to the next thing. There is a quality of immersion. Washing a dish, there is just the feeling of warm water on skin, the sight of the soap bubbles, the smooth surface of the plate. Folding laundry, there is just the warmth from the dryer, the texture of the cotton, the simple, satisfying geometry of creating order. In these actions, there is no separation between the doer and the doing. They are fully inhabiting the action, and in that full inhabitation, the noisy self with its worries and commentaries falls silent. The task becomes a portal into presence. This cultivated presence is what gives their interactions such weight and clarity. When they listen, they are truly listening. They are not merely waiting for their turn to speak, formulating a response while the other person is still talking. Their attention is given fully, a generous offering. One feels heard by them because in that moment, one is being heard. There is no division of their attention. The same is true when they speak. The words emerge from a place of stillness, carrying the full weight of considered thought. There is no need to fill silences with nervous chatter because they are comfortable inhabiting the quiet, understanding that meaning often gathers in the spaces between words. And so it becomes clear that their calm is not a personality trait they were lucky to be born with. It is a landscape they have chosen to inhabit, a landscape they maintain with the quiet, dedicated practice of a gardener. It is a lifelong, gentle conversation with the self, a continuous, loving return to the anchor of the present moment. It is built upon the early architecture of a nervous system taught to trust, sustained by the vigilant guardianship of their inner world, and perfected through the alchemy of accepting what is. Their calm is a living practice. It is not a destination they have reached, but a path they walk with every conscious breath, with every grounded step, with every open hearted acceptance of the beautiful, fleeting, and imperfect now.